Bill Ackman joined The World According to Boyar to discuss the Howard Hughes transaction. But this conversation went far beyond just investing. Given his reputation as not only one of the most successful investors of our time, but also a vocal figure on a range of controversial issues and a social activist, I saw this as a great opportunity to not only discuss the deal, but also explore his broader perspectives. I'm a firm believer in free speech and the value of hearing different viewpoints, whether I agree with them or not, because that's how real learning happens. You may strongly disagree with some of Bill's views, or you may find them thought-provoking. Either way, I believe understanding different perspectives is essential, especially when dealing with complex and emotionally charged topics. With that said, let's get to the episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I'd love to spend some time just talking about some other issues that you've been quite vocal on that I think are really important.
Of course, happy to.
Let's start with something non-controversial, politics. It won't upset anyone. So we're about a month into the Trump administration, although at this point it feels like a year. Kind of what are your thoughts so far?
I would say as expected. And I think a lot is being accomplished very quickly. And I've not seen more energy, speed of execution, and evidence that what he campaigned on, he's going to execute on. So I think according to plan, maybe even to a greater degree than anyone could possibly have expected.
Is there anything that he's done in particular that this is great, he's gotten it right, he's nailed it?
There's certainly things like getting hostages home, which began, a week or two before he took office, and his approach there, the results speak for itself. That's clearly something where a lot of time passed, whatever it is, hundreds of days. And with a few strong words from the president, or our new president, the hostages started coming home. I think that's a major, major success story. I think going to, sticking with Middle East and geopolitics, Iran was on the brink of launching a major attack on Israel. They were putting out campaign videos showing ballistic missiles, soon to be launched against the country. Iran went very, very quiet as soon as Trump won the election, and things have been actually much, much quieter in the Middle East. I think the U.S. has kind of reasserted its authority as a strong power, kind of globally. Trump is already, he said he would end with a bit of hyperbole, he'd end the war in Ukraine in a day, but I think he's going to end it. And I think he'll end it on terms that work. I doubt both parties will be happy, or would certainly acknowledge that. But I think it's going to get resolved in a way that will save lives and protect Ukraine enable Ukraine to retain its sovereignty. So I'm very bullish on that. I think DOGE has been an incredible effort. And it makes a lot of sense why the deep state is pushing back as aggressively as they are. But I think it's an absolutely necessary thing that needs to happen. Just to give you a kind of crazy example, Musk did his normal, let's tell me what you've been up to for the last week and just send me 5 bullet points. The notion that government workers would protest that, or at least some subset of them, as opposed to just writing a little note back saying, here's what I've been up to for the last 5 days, kind of speaks to some of the dysfunction in Washington. I don't think the American people have a lot of tolerance for it. I think there's enormous support for DOGE. I think everyone knows there's enormous waste. And I think DOGE is going to go beyond eliminating waste. It's also going to eliminate a lot of waste, regulations that are holding back the economy. So, I think a lot of, so I'm very enthusiastic about what's been accomplished so far. They'll make some mistakes working as quickly as they're working, but they can, dismissing people who oversee the nuclear arsenal, accidentally or whatever, they fix that pretty quickly. Okay. But, that's the risk of going quickly. But, I'm excited about everything from, it's about time we fixed our air traffic control, technology. I mean, I'm very confident it happens in the, with oversight from our CTO in chief, Mr. Musk.
In terms of DOGE, do you think it can actually make a meaningful dent in the deficit?
Yes.
Enough to affect Treasury prices, or?
Yeah. For sure. I think a big part of it is we've been operating in administrations where there's been no regard for how much debt we put on the country. No one cares. And where no one's shown any kind of care. Now, this is the first time I've ever seen any kind of cost effort of consequence. Actually, Clinton actually made some progress in this regard, years ago. But this, I think, is an even better effort. And, run by the best, probably private sector person who could possibly run the effort. And I'm sure a crack technology team. So I'm excited about it.
At the end of the day, though, isn't it really just about entitlement reform? Otherwise, we're still in the same mess.
Look, I think there are intelligent entitlement reform things that could get done and should get done, but there's also a lot of waste and fraud and abuse, as are the terms that have become commonly thrown around here. And no one is opposed to that. If indeed there are people receiving Social Security checks that are dead, and I guarantee there are, that is true. And Medicare, talk about the healthcare system, is ripe with fraud, waste, and abuse, and the government is the biggest buyer of healthcare, so it's being taken advantage of. The Defense Department, I think the new defense secretary is also very focused on this issue, and I'm sure we're not spending defense money intelligently. A lot of the way these programs are done is, you build the F-35, and a portion of the plan comes from every state in the country, and that's how these things get done. And by the way, producing a plane where one, a part comes from every part of the country is not the most efficient way to produce a plane. And query whether we need as many manned. I'm sure the F-35 is an unbelievable plane, and there's a place for it. But I think the future warfare is going to be much more like unmanned drones, and much more Anduril and less Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a pharmaceutical company now, would you be scared? I mean, because the U.S. has really been subsidizing the world for the last 30 years.
I would be scared if I was doing something wrong. I would be prepared to be agile and nimble in light of, the changes that are coming.
Obviously, he's done a lot of positive things. Anything he's gotten really wrong, in your opinion?
It's sort of too early to say. Trump is sort of known for saying stuff that, that obviously gets headlines, scares the shit out of people. But there's generally a method to his madness. Recent comments about Ukraine, I think, really have scared people. But, when the United States has invested a few $100 billion in supporting Ukraine, and the United States has said, hey, you know what, there's a way for Ukraine can pay us back, and where it's a win-win, and maybe there's a deal to be made, a joint venture on some mining certain assets that are important to the United States government, and he gets blown off by the, publicly by the president of Ukraine. You can expect Trump to be angry and to say some words that, scare the the daylights out of the Zelensky regime, and magically you wake up in the morning and the newspaper, oh, there's a deal. So there's a method to the madness, as I've sort of figured out over time. And so you sort of ultimately judge Trump by not words so much as the actions and outcomes. And I think he's made a lot of progress. So I'm very supportive.
Speaking of support, you've been a supporter, with some hesitation of RFK Jr. I love what he's doing for nutrition. I think it's long overdue. The vaccine skepticism has me a bit concerned. Kind of, how do you square those two things?
I'm an RFK fan. That doesn't mean I think that everything he believes is true. And I'm a person who believes we need to very carefully reassess the approach that we've taken to vaccines, the exemption from liability that we've given to drug makers, and what that has led to, which is a proliferation of the vaccine schedule for kids without any study of the cumulative impact of all of these vaccines, the age at which we give it to kids, combining, vaccine shots of giving to an infant at the time of life they receive it, the risk versus the reward. Having recently gone through this experience with a 5.25-year-old child, the day our daughter was born, the nurse, injected her with hepatitis B vaccine. And hepatitis B, is transmitted, generally sexual transmission, intravenous drug users, not something that my daughter was likely to be exposed to. Why pick the first day of her life to administer this vaccine where there can be side effects, and, bypassing, going straight to the, if they tested the mother, they would not have given her this vaccine. But, it's something where, my understanding is Merck was not successful when they rolled out this drug to the targeted population. So they convinced a bunch of regulators to make it mandated for children, because that would, reduce the impact of hepatitis B. And no, the degree of safety study, the number of kids it was tried upon, if you read the package label, it's frightening. It's something like 184, infants to 10-year-olds were tested with the vaccine, and they followed them for 5 days after administration. And that was the extent of the, what was required before the FDA gave authorization. And the whole thing seems crazy to me. So it's something you study carefully. I don't think we want, now the risk when you raise any questions is that a whole bunch of people decide they don't want the polio vaccine, the measles vaccine. And, that's just something he needs to manage very, very carefully.
In terms of managing, where do the Democrats go from here? I mean, they really put themselves in a hole.
The Democratic Party needs a complete, reboot. But, the problem is that, leadership and people in power generally don't like to give up power. But this is a case where a lot of people need to resign in disgrace, and the party needs a complete reboot. But I think they continue to double down on all of the mistakes and policies that were made before. If I remember the Democratic Party or the leadership, I would be saying, we love this effort to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. DOGE is great. We just want to make sure there's some checks and balances. We want, please keep us informed, as opposed to, marching and opposing and telling staff members not to respond to emails, stuff like that. And that's just sort of one of many examples. I don't think of myself ever really as a member of a party. I don't think of myself as a member of the Republican Party. I have had to check a box in order to vote in New York City on occasion. But, I've always been kind of a centrist. I like to vote for people I think are the best candidates, regardless of political affiliation. But the Democratic Party has not done itself a service in the last 4 years, and really probably longer than that.
In terms of the best candidates, do you think the Democrats just miss a golden opportunity, after Biden dropped out? Could they have nominated someone amazing who would never have subjected themselves?
Yes. The best opportunity they had was, Jamie Dimon, I think, wanted to be president, but didn't want to go through the rigmarole of running for office. I don't know if his family would have let him, but it was sort of an interesting moment where he could have ran a, 100-day campaign, and he would have had a real shot. Instead, they put up, one of the worst candidates we've had. And, every decision, lying to the American people about the health of the president, and the cognitive health in particular of the president, and then, the coup over the weekend. And then, they should have run a process, some kind of open primary process, some kind of debate, thing where different candidates would have a shot to compete. But that was not done. It was when people used to smoke, they called it smoke-filled rooms, where these, decisions were made. And it just, the opposite, you can't call it the Democratic Party anymore. And people now call it the Democrat Party. I would say I call it the anti-Democratic Party. That's really what it's became.
In terms of politics, do you ever see, you hinted that you would serve if you were needed. Does Treasury Secretary Ackman have a good ring to it, or?
Not for a very long period of time. First of all, we'll segue at some point the Howard Hughes transaction. I do want to, my long-term ambition has always been to have a better record than Buffett. That's what I said when I started in this business. He's 94. In order to be competitive, I got to be at this for another, 36 years. And I can't get distracted by a stint as Treasury Secretary. And the good news is there are a lot of other very talented candidates.